Now, once again, Kemi Badenoch is all over the news again for the not so positive reasons. This time, she is having um, a talk about how she had a very negative experience in Nigeria in boarding school. Now, if you grew up in Africa, for most of us who are probably under the age of 50 or younger, you may have gone to a boarding school if you grew up in Africa. I did. I went to Kenyan boarding schools where I grew up. My family was there for 11 years. I went to Ugandan boarding school and I had a range of experience. Listen to what she had to say.
The place that I'm talking about, having to fetch buckets of water. And that was the first time that I was away from home, away from my family. And I wasn't just looking at...
This is a boarding school?
Yes, it's a federal boarding school. And it was
You
very...
shared a dormitory with other girls?
We're about 150, I think. 20 to 30 in a room, and there were 6 rooms.
And so the machete is for cutting the grass?
Yes, cutting the grass.
Explain why were you cutting the grass?
Well, because, who else is going to cut the grass? It's just, it's the
grass grows, you have
exactly. They're not, this is a federal school where this is the old grammar school system sort of fading out. And everyone who passed an exam and got a certain score got to go to a federal school. And this was more socialism. So they sprinkled people around. They didn't want one school getting all the best results. They would mix people about. So you could end up getting sent thousands of miles away to a boarding school, at the extreme end of the country. So I was lucky. I didn't get sent too far away, but I was very far from home. I'd never been away from home before, and it was like Lord of the Flies. The students were in control. We needed to look after the school ground. So using a machete, having to clean toilets with no running water. I'm not going to go into the description of that, but it is very, very very grotty. And so
I just think that she came out with it and spoke about it in a relatively negative way. And I think that there are a lot of positives going to a boarding school in Africa. I went to boarding school at the age of approximately 7 or 8. Now, is that young? Yes, it was young. And to be honest with you, it was challenging. But there were a lot of things that were put in place to actually help. Now, one of the other schools that I went to is Maseno School, which is right here. This is just the sign of the school. And I went to that school. I think I must have been at least uh, maybe 9, 10 plus. And I stayed there for a few years. But my mother removed me and took me to a school in Nairobi because I was getting relatively unwell all the time. Then I went to, previous to that in Uganda, I went to Namagunga Primary School. This is where I went at the age of 7 or 8. And there were similar things. She mentioned using machetes. We call them pangas. So when you say machete, we use machete to cut grass. You could see that the English person interviewing her, eyebrows were raised. Now, it doesn't sound very positive because machete is an extreme thing, a tool that even here in UK, you hear of machetes being used during knife crime. So that she could have used other words and said things a bit more differently. I then went to a school for when I left primary. I went to a school called Greenfields College. This was secondary. Here you can say, this is me and my friends here in a dormitory. We shared dormitories. There was 3 of us, and even in a primary boarding school, we did share boarding school, or rather, we shared beds, not beds. We shared rooms, dormitories, and like she said there was probably about 20, 30 in one dormitory, but we didn't share beds or anything. We had to fetch water, a little bit farther away. We had the curriculum was the same. The food was slightly, it was challenging. But I feel like as though this is what has made most of us Africans that, for instance, wherever we are now, we are in the diaspora. We've come from this kind of backgrounds and gone to boarding schools that were slightly different and more perhaps challenging to be in than a UK boarding school, for instance. And it has made us very resilient, I think, wherever we are. I think there's a lot of grounding, there's a lot of rooting that we got from these boarding schools. There was a lot of discipline. And honestly speaking, I absolutely loved Greenfields College, Kitale. I don't know whoever will watch this, whether anybody will recognize these pictures. These were my friends, and it was such a lovely time. It was a lovely time of bonding, of sharing. It was just a really, really such a positive time. There were challenging times, but I think the best times that I had, growing up into teenagehood, probably from the age of around 15, 16, and so forth, were in a boarding school. And as a matter of fact, I then came to the UK. After this very school, Greenfields College, I was removed from this school where I was bonding very well with my friends. I was getting on well, but my family had to move to abroad. My father took a position to leave the country, and we had lived in Kenya for about 11 years, having left Uganda to go to Kenya into exile because, let me just leave it at that. We just had to leave. And so I then came to the United Kingdom age 15, actually the same age as Kemi Badenoch came to UK. And I went straight to a boarding school. One of the schools was in Littlehampton in West Sussex, and this was a Catholic school. So that was quite a comparison and a little bit of, again, culture shock for me. But these boarding schools in Africa have probably changed more now from what I'm hearing, especially in Kenya and some schools as well in Uganda. There is still some real challenges in the remote areas. That is very true. But a lot has changed, and I think even from some of the channels that I watch from people who have been to boarding schools, they do talk about it and say, when they talk about things that and the way life is and what they've got to take to school, what they're allowed and what they aren't allowed to do, and so forth, it sounds like things have really changed. We cannot really um, look back in our backgrounds and say it was so bad and it was so rough. I mean, slashing grass, in those schools was a way of teaching us how to keep our environments clean and tidy. That's just what it was. And it was discipline. And that's what it was. The same thing went for our rooms, for our clothes. We had to wash our own clothes. We had to keep everything around us tidy. The previous picture, that was Greenfields College, Kitale. That wasn't me. That was a friend of mine. And in this picture here that I'm sharing, this is actually in Littlehampton, West Sussex. This was the school that I went to, Holy Family Convent, I believe. I think it was. And this is one of the nuns that looked after us. Previously, in Amagunga, which is in Uganda, one of the main and prominent primary schools actually in Uganda, that was also run by nuns, a sister called Sister Mary. Recently, she was highlighted on what she's doing, what she's been doing over the years, and she's still up to today. I believe she's still over there now. So, and this here was a trip that we had at a school here in the United Kingdom. This was a geography trip that we had gone on. And when I came to the UK, I could also say some things that were a culture shock to me. Certainly, it was a lot easier where I was using cold water and fetching my own water in an African school. Here now, hot water was running in taps. The food was different. The food was probably a lot better in comparison to the deeper end boarding school that I went to. But it is what it is. And I don't look down on it with disdain. Kemi Badenoch spoke with so much disdain about her background in a boarding school in Nigeria, and I think it's unfortunate. I think she needs to pick up the positives from her background in Nigeria and bring those on, because this is totally, totally embarrassing and uncalled for. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new here, please do subscribe. We talk about matters like this and a lot more.